A lot of things in early childhood can look like inattention, right? And then we worry, oh my gosh, our kids aren't, does my child have ADHD? Is there something wrong with my kid? And so, I often talk to parents about let's not treat the leaves, let's treat the roots of the tree.
Hello, and welcome to our Catch Conversation, an opportunity for two professionals to dialogue about topics that present at the forefront of our community. I'm Dr. Lisa Novak, a neuropsychologist and proud board member of Catch. Today's topic for discussion is how to prioritize our children's needs during this return to normalcy. Parents and caregivers have expressed a host of observations and concerns related to their children over this past year. Increased symptoms of anxiety and depression, fear of falling behind academically, and even more basic daily struggles like difficulty falling asleep, having toileting problems, and behavioral outbursts. It can feel very overwhelming to have to tackle it all, and we're going to chat today about how to focus our efforts to help serve our children best. I would like to welcome my colleague, Dr. Rachel Fancher, to our conversation. Rachel is a clinical psychologist and owner of a fantastic group practice in Skokie, Fancher Psychology, which serves children, teens, adults, and families. Thank you for joining me. So Rachel, I'm wondering if you want to start by just sharing a little bit about what you're noticing in your practice that a lot of your families are bringing to the forefront right now.
Yeah, so we've seen all of that over this year. And I think that the main undercurrent has been anxiety and uncertainty. Everybody is worried. They're worried about the right choices to make for their kids. They're worried about when their kids are going to go back to school. And then once they've gotten the green light to go back to school, they're worried about going back to school. And, I think that my older kids that are in the practice, ones who are starting to finish high school and go off to college, they're worried about what colleges are going to think and how this is changing, this huge transition in their lives, and a lot of anxiety in that area. Parents of littler kids are worried about social skills. Kids who have missed out on preschool, kindergarten, and haven't gotten some of that child peer interaction over the past year. They've worried about, do I need to supplement things? Are they going to be behind? Is this a problem long term? So those have been some big questions that people have been asking.
Absolutely. I have seen the exact same thing in my practice too. And, part of the struggle is really where do we help them focus? In particular, if they're looking for outside strategies, other interventions, it can feel at times like it's hard to decide. Do we focus on the social piece? They haven't had normal social interactions. Do we focus on the academics? We're worried about them struggling there. And just helping to figure out where do we place our energy, knowing that we can't tackle all of it at the exact same time.
Yeah, I think it's such a good question because it's triage, right? I mean, that's something when people come into therapy that we talk about. All right, there's this whole list of things that we want to tackle. Let's whittle it down to what is going to be the most bang for our buck in treatment and what's causing the most distress and what will give us the best benefit. And where I am guiding families historically and especially right now is the social emotional. Right now more than ever, I think we just need to be paying attention to how our kids are feeling and shoring that part of them up. That's this huge underpinning to academic success. If we only focus on the academics, it's kind of like building the scaffolding on this really faulty foundation. And we need to really focus on how to get our kids feeling okay, feeling safe, feeling supported, feeling validated for all the different feelings they're having during this time. And then from that place, everything else is going to build back up just fine. Our kids are really resilient. I think that a lot of the time as parents, we hold more anxiety about things than our children do. And so working through that ourselves is often really important. I have 2 little boys, and so I've been through it personally this year too.
I very much agree. And that's something that a sentiment that I share a lot of the time is that children need to be available for the learning. They need to be available for the other resources that we're providing for them. And by available, I don't even just mean physically present, but truly just cognitively open. And we know about anxiety and mental health struggles that if their mind is elsewhere, if the emotion centers of their brain are taking over, they really aren't present mentally in a way that they would even be able to be picking up on some of those other skills skills that we might be trying to teach them. And so it just feels so essential. I think about like those hierarchy of needs too, that our physical safety and well-being has to come first before we can even focus on anything else. And, that feels so essential right now, kind of in light of everything that kids have been going through.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of things in early childhood can look like inattention, right? And then we worry, oh my gosh, our kids aren't, like, does my child have ADHD? Are there something wrong with my kid? And oftentimes, if a kid is worried, or if a kid doesn't know how to regulate the feelings in their body, or if a kid is ruminating and thinking about something, that's going to be happening, or they're worried about eating in the lunchroom when they go back to school, right? Like, that is all going to take their attention and their focus away. And so, I often talk to parents about, like, let's not treat the leaves, let's treat the roots of the tree, and if we're really only looking at, like, we've got to get this academic thing back up, you could be doing these brilliant academic interventions and it's not going to matter, because the roots are what we need to focus on. And if we build those healthy roots, then all the rest is going to grow really well. And so I think that's a big part of, as we're reintegrating into, what people are saying, like normalcy, right? This is the new world that our kids are going to be walking into, and trying to figure out, how is it that we can understand what's going on? What are their feelings about different things that are happening? Teaching them coping strategies, teaching them affect regulation, so that when they're in the classroom, they know how to deal with all of these things coming up. And then what you were saying, right? They're more able to learn, they're more able to take in new information.
Absolutely. And I think inherent in that, and something that we're all guilty of sometimes, is a lot of, projecting our fears for the future, the what ifs of when they go back to school, or what is the summer going to look like, or what about the fall when they, enter their new grade. And, we spend so much time thinking about the future that I think it becomes harder to really just be in the present. Mm-hmm. And that can be so incredibly helpful here too, as we think about what in the present moment can we do to help our child feel safer, feel more comfortable, integrate a little bit more successfully back slowly into the things that they're working on, without letting ourselves get too caught up in 3 and 5 and 10 steps down the road.
Absolutely. I mean, so this is a cornerstone of anxiety treatment, right? Like, the what ifing into the future. And then, if we think about all these things that could happen, it gets overwhelming, and then we're like paralyzed. Like, well, I'm not going to do anything. So I often talk, kids, adults, everybody, that our brains and our bodies like to be in the same place, right? And if our body is here, it can only be here, but our brain can, float around all over the place and worry about all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So kind of teaching some of those core mindfulness skills. And it's not complicated meditation. I know the word meditation sometimes, like, people have all kinds of reactions to, right? But you don't have to be doing this beautiful 10-minute, half-hour, Zen retreat kind of a thing. It's really just learning, is my brain in my body in this moment? And am I reacting to what's happening, or am I reacting to my fear of what could happen? Mm-hmm. And trying to have clients kind of like gear into this present moment, like you were saying, which is so key and so important. We don't know what's going to happen, and we never know, right? But I think this has been highlighted tenfold during COVID, that we just never really know what could be coming down the road, which is scary. But how do we focus in on the present moment? Because most of the time things are actually going better than we realize in our present moment, I don't know. What do you think?
No, I completely agree with that. And I think too, a part of it is just even managing expectations around what does it mean if things are going okay right now? And how do I define what okay or success or progress even looks like? And I know, one of the big factors that has come up a lot in the work that I've been doing is this idea of social anxiety, and how, as devastating as COVID has been in many ways, for some, they've actually thrived in a less demanding kind of social type of environment. And they've been able to stay home and be a little bit more withdrawn or internal and to themselves. And now the idea of actually having to go out and be social again and having to interact with peers can feel very overwhelming. And so I think about, how do we scaffold and create a hierarchy around some of that too, that maybe, the first interaction that child has with other peers may not be at a big birthday party with 20 kids. Maybe that's too overwhelming, and we need to start with the little steps, and having that one play date with that one friend in a safe, comfortable way is a much more conducive environment to that child's success. And I think we can so quickly say that there's a problem, right? If we try to throw somebody into the deep end and they're not responding in the way that maybe they used to, or we're hoping that they do, and instead finding little successes along the way that will build to those bigger successes we inevitably hope to see.
Absolutely. And I think this is so important to adjust our expectations and really realize that we all need to be able to tiptoe back in and not expect ourselves to go right back to where we were, over a year ago. And I think this question that you're asking of, okay, so I'm worried, is my kid going to be okay? Let's just send him back in. Let's just do all the things, right? Like, well, that's probably going to be a little overwhelming. Some kids, fine. They might be totally fine with it. Other kids, a lot of kids are going to probably have a reaction to that. And it's this question of gradual exposure versus like flooding and pushing them in the deep end, right? That some people have this urge to just like flood them, push them in the deep end, they'll be fine. But that can actually be a kind of traumatic experience for kids, especially kids who have a predisposition to social anxiety. Whereas this gradual exposure where you kind of do what you were talking about. Okay, let's have a play date outside with a friend. And then, maybe we'll go with a group of friends, and then maybe we'll sign up for a really small class outside, and, we'll like sit together, and just these pieces of recognizing that our kids are humans who are going to have their own reactions to things, and also kind of thinking about how we might respond, in those moments, and recognizing too that we have a lot more years of, coping and a lot more years of experience with things that our kids don't. And so this is a really key thing. And I am encouraging parents to kind of take their kids' lead to some extent and not go on the full, like, well, they're not ready. They don't want to do any of it, right? Because that's kind of avoidance. And that's the most basic anxiety coping strategy when you don't know what else to do. Well, I'm just not going to do it, right? And that's not really great for anxiety treatment or, getting people to feel confident in their abilities. But there is this happy medium of saying, okay, so my child's a little resistant to this, but let's find something that could feel challenging but not terrifying and work from there.
Absolutely. And I think talking to our children about those things too, as they're happening, opening up the dialogue and the language around their emotional experiences, emphasizing things that are going well, and also acknowledging things that were hard. I think we are reticent at times to openly talk with our children about things that were difficult experiences, either for ourselves or for them. But normalizing that process too of, hey, I did a challenging thing today, and it made me feel frustrated, uncomfortable, fill in the blank. And this is how I worked through that, and giving our children the language to learn how to work through their own challenges and manage those situations differently or more effectively.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And this is a question that I often get asked, when parents are going through their own emotional struggles about things. Should I share this or should I not share it? And sometimes parents really want to protect their kids, right? We all do this, of course. But this idea of invalidating a kid's reality, right? If a kid comes to you and they're like, Mom, are you okay? Well, they know something's off, right? Kids are these tiny little sensing machines. They know, right? They know when something's not okay. And if you as a parent go to your kid and you respond to that and you're like, I'm fine, everything's good, right? Well, you've just invalidated their reality because they're like, oh, I guess I can't trust my gut. I guess I was wrong about that, right? Which is the opposite of what we want to be doing. We want kids to be learning to trust their guts and learning to, have their realities validated. And then two, we're not going to share with our kids, everything that's going on with us or, all of our deepest concerns, but a developmentally appropriate answer is really important, right? Exactly what you were saying about, I am having a hard time. I'm kind of worried about this thing, but here's how I'm dealing with it. I think you said it beautifully. Our kids will model. If we can model for them, this is how I get through hard things. That is a huge piece of learning for children in a social emotional way.
Something else that I find really interesting, and this is, obviously a time in history with this common humanity that we're all going through this experience together. But I think we can still forget that sometimes. And I have a lot of families coming to me almost with this degree of like shame or embarrassment as they're describing a symptom that their child has, like a child who has been fully toilet trained for years, who's suddenly having accidents when they're back at school in hybrid in the mornings, or children who are coming home and regressing into baby talk when they had, no speech or language issues there before. And I think these concerns or these symptoms, these presentations are so much more common than people are realizing. And I think it's so helpful to make families aware of that their children, it can feel very lonely to stand on what feels like an island and say, why is my child having these troubles? But to know that there are a lot of other children having similar experiences, slightly different experiences, but that are all going through this, I think it takes away some of that fear of my child's going to be so much farther behind when we realize everyone has regressed a little bit or taken a little bit of a step back. And we're all going to be working on that healing process together too.
Yeah, I think regression is more the norm than the exception during this time. It's one of the ways that our kids are coping with confusion and tragedy and loss and fear. And, our kids, all behavior has meaning for all of us, but for kids in particular. And it's a way, if we can be curious about our kids instead of like really judgmental about like, oh my gosh, what does this mean about my child? Or what does this mean about my parenting? Right? That stance shift can make a huge difference. Like, what is this communicating? What is this telling me? Versus, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Because I find that for a lot of people, that's where anxiety lies, right? It's in the interpretation of the feeling or the interpretation of the behavior or the event. That's where it can go down the anxiety train really quickly versus let me be curious about this. Let me just try and understand this. And to your point earlier, when you were saying like just talking to our kids, asking them, hey, how you feeling about this? That's a really, really important thing throughout childhood and parenting, but especially right now when there's a lot of feelings happening.
Yes, and that idea of being judgmental about the symptoms or the things we're seeing, I think we know that that's coming from a fear-based place as well, that, parents are having so much guilt right now about, have I made the right decisions for my child through this process? I had the option to send them in person or remote. I kept them remote for their physical safety. Did that have a negative impact on their social, development and growth? Have I made the wrong decisions through this process? And I think we need to just practice being gentle with ourselves and forgiving and understanding that there was no and is no right and wrong here. We all make the best decisions we can with the information that we have, and then we move through, right? And every decision has its consequence. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that I talk to all my clients about, really trying to step out of that right or wrong, like that binary lens, right? Very, very rarely is there a right answer and a wrong answer. 99.9% of the time, there are lots of answers in this messy middle gray area, which humans don't like, right? We want the yes, the no, the right, the wrong. And you're right. I think that we were faced with a bunch of decisions that all had pros and cons. And we picked the pros and cons that we could accept in the moment and that would fit with our family. And I think all of us are second guessing ourselves to some extent, right? There's no ideal in this type of a situation. We're all just kind of surviving through it. And so I agree, this ability to practice some self-compassion with ourselves as parents, with our kids too. We're all doing the best we can when the, whatever rule books that were created, right, for parenthood were completely thrown out the window. And
they were.
We're all doing the best we can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, it brings me back to the academic piece. That's a question that I get asked a lot in the work that I do, because part of my evaluations include typically some academic testing to get a sense of where the child is performing, relative to same grade peers. The best information that I can share with parents that are really concerned about any specific discrete skills that their children had that they don't seem to have anymore, or just a lack of progress that potentially they've made over the past year, is that this really does seem to be where the majority of people are falling. And when everybody is behind, it essentially means that nobody is behind. We're all coming from the same place. The teachers are extremely aware of that, as are the administrative staff. And so as these children reintegrate into school, they're going to get the education that they need to catch them back up to whatever the place is that we're quote unquote supposed to be. And they're going to do that together. And so it really, I like to try to allay the concerns of these parents that they're so worried that their, child is falling further behind.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, a bell curve is based on a whole bunch of data from a whole bunch of children. And now that bell curve does not apply, right? It doesn't apply to our kids now because we are all in a very different position. And I think that if sometimes we try to hold on to the known, right? We try to hold on to what we have always known. But that's where we run into a lot of trouble, right? If we continue to focus, like, I just need to get my kid to this place academically, they've got to be at the, XYZ reading or the XYZ math. I think it's really a misguided place to be focusing our attention at this point because it's kind of arbitrary right now. The teachers are very aware of it. And it's also kind of looking at the leaves and not the roots in this point in time. So yeah, it's scary and it's hard because I think a lot of parents, we want the best for our kids. We want our kids to have opportunities, but kids they're still going to college. They're still finishing their grades and doing their work. And it looks a little bit different, but everybody is going to get through this. And I agree with you. I think that being able to pull back and de-emphasize the academics is really important. And so if you have an option, right, between sending your kid to like math camp or a socially based camp that they're really excited about, I would send them to the socially based camp that they're really excited about this summer. That's the one where they probably going to get that nurturance and that filling up of those core needs that they've been missing. And the math piece, we can fit in that they, along the way.
So Rachel, I know one question that I've been getting asked a lot is already about the upcoming school year. What are things going to look like in the fall? What is school going to look like? And how are things going to be for my child? And I'm wondering if you've been asked that question and how you kind of frame that for families.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that so many of us hate uncertainty. We don't like sitting in the unknown, and we just want someone to look at us and tell us you're going to be okay and your kid's going to be okay. And in reality, that is the case. They will be okay. We don't know what it's going to look like, and we don't know exactly how they will, but they will, because we've all been putting one foot in front of the other. And I think the thing that's so important is to be able to be focused right now. What's okay right now? What's challenging right now? Let's focus on the now, because 10 different things could change before the fall, right? And this is worry in a nutshell. Well, what if this? Well, what about this? Well, what if this? Okay, well, should we be doing this? And then maybe this, so that if this happens, right? Like that's where we really go into these like thinking traps that can get so uncomfortable and scary. And I always encourage clients to pull out of that thinking trap and to pull into right now and to focus on, okay, what can we do in this moment to lead lives that feel healthy and fulfilling? And then the fall is going to come and we will address whatever comes in the fall. But it's a waste of energy in this moment to try to plan and predict for something that's months down the road. And ultimately, we will all be okay. And if we're struggling, there are places that you can seek help. And there are people out there who will be able to give you, some of that guidance.
Absolutely. And I think too, when we think about goals for like reintegration back to school and for next year, I think about things like wanting to make sure that we revive in kids that maybe have lost some of that this year, the love of learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is that we want to really focus on. How do we get them excited about learning and about being a member of the classroom and willing to participate, accepting of imperfections, all those pieces that really relate more to that social emotional well-being, but that can be taught within the classroom and school setting and really get emphasized there. And those are the things that I hope so deeply that we are really thinking about as we decide what to prioritize and what to focus on in these kiddos.
Yeah, because an A is great, but an A doesn't mean anything if kids don't have, grit and determination and, the ability to understand, oh, okay, I didn't understand that so well, or, oh, I got the A, but you know what? It doesn't matter because I didn't, I didn't learn anything, right? It's like the A is only a symbol. And we really want to be focusing on all those underlying things about them enjoying the process of learning and them being able to feel like it's about more than just the grade on the paper.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts, any last, pieces or something you've been sharing with families who are just thinking about how to place their energy, in these next couple of months and as we move through the summer and really try to rebuild some of what feels like it's been lost?
Mhm. I think that I've been trying to really empower families and parents to look inwardly and to think about the things that they have missed over this past year and to think about, how they can start to bring things back into their family lives that they have missed, but also to be really intentional about that and not just rush back to everything that was before, because I think in our society and especially, in the area where we practice on Chicago's North Shore, right? Like there's a lot of overscheduling and there's a lot of activity and there's a lot of things, and to be really intentional about what like fills our family cup up and what do we really love and enjoy and what kind of drained us before and we just were on the treadmill and didn't think to get off. So I think intentionality and self-compassion have been kind of the two overarching themes that I've been talking to families about. How about
Yeah.
you?
I've been thinking a lot about the motivation or the underlying root causes of behavior, and just really helping families and parents and caregivers continue to look critically and carefully at the symptoms, if you will, that they've been seeing in their children, and recognizing that, and I'm going to borrow this from Dr. Ross Green, but that kids do well when they can. And that when a child is struggling, it's not laziness, it's not they don't care. There is typically something underlying that, and continuing to explore what that is and explore the worries and the fears or the other things, the skill deficits that are getting in the way for that child, and really just giving them the space to work through that and the skills to work through that, as opposed to assuming that it's just intentional or behavioral. I think all of our frustration and our our limits have been pushed through this year, but really giving ourselves and our kids the grace to accept that we're doing our best, even though it's been really hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I really appreciate it. You're awesome as always. Thanks, everyone. Bye. You can find these Catch conversations, as well as a wealth of other resources, on our website, catchiscommunity.org, and find us on social media at catchiscommunity.